Now, I've always viewed Conan O'Brien as one of the good ones. A liberal, sure, but not a guy that needed to rely on Donald Trump to be funny, or a guy that was so politics brained that it destroyed him. I think he got a raw deal on the late night or the Tonight Show or whatever, where he got basically booted out after a year or two unceremoniously, probably because he wouldn't obsess over Trump. He has some of the most hilarious all-time sketches. Like in the year 2000, he brought us Triumph, the insult comic dog, and so many other great things in the past. But now he's starting to take a lot of heat for the unfortunate thing that happened to Rob Reiner. If you don't know by now, Rob Reiner, his son, took his life and his wife's life as they slept. But all eyes were on some bizarre behavior that happened before the event, and Conan O'Brien telling guests at the party who wanted to call 911 to not do so. Now, obviously, Conan O'Brien is not responsible for this man's behavior. However, I thought that this was an important topic because if you see something like this, if somebody's behaving like this, you should call. You should call to protect not just the individual, but others around them. The reason they didn't call is because they didn't want any Hollywood drama. And ultimately, who knows? If they had called and Rob Reiner's son was placed on a psychiatric hold, Rob Reiner and his wife would probably still be alive today. Now, again, his son did the crime, but this is very interesting. Conan O'Brien stopped party guests from calling 911 on Nick Reiner insiders reveal disturbing new details of final hours before Rob and Michelle were taken. Conan O'Brien stopped a friend from calling 911 during an explosive fight between Rob and Nick Reiner at the comedian's Christmas party, just hours before the director's son allegedly took his parents' lives. Multiple attendees have reported seeing Rob, 78, and his wife, Michelle, 70, having a heated argument with the 32-year-old Nick at O'Brien's LA mansion on Saturday night. Nick is said to have been behaving erratically all evening, but one source familiar with the party has now told the Daily Mail that the spat grew so intense that at least one guest suggested calling the cops to intervene. Now, I can say definitively, if they had done that, he probably would have been taken in for psychiatric evaluation. But again, I'm not blaming Conan. Literally anybody else at that party could have called 911. Even after Conan O'Brien said, don't call 911, they could have went outside and called 911. That's what I would have done if I felt like things were escalating out of control, but I wasn't there and I wasn't worried about protecting wealthy elites. They got in an argument, the father and son. It got so bad and so loud, someone wanted to call the police to report it, but Conan O'Brien stepped in and said, it's my house, my party, and I'm not calling the police. He talked them out of calling the police. Conan O'Brien, 62, did not respond to the Daily Mail's request for comment. Another source corroborated the account, saying party guests had raised concerns about Nick's mental state and suggested contacting the cops before O'Brien shut the idea down. When ish was hitting the fan, someone said, we need to call the police. The conversation was about getting his kid put on a mental health hold, the second source told the Daily Mail. Now, to be very clear, Conan O'Brien was probably trying to protect his friend Rob Reiner from embarrassment, but if the kid had been put on a mental health hold, he would not have been free to take his parents' life that night. This is just tragic all around. There were many other people at the party that could have called too, and there are stories around him being on some sort of new medication and dealing with schizophrenia and other issues. You just got to call. Even if it's your family, even if it's your friend, if you think they're going to hurt you or someone else, you have a responsibility to call and not to worry about hurt feelings. I've gone through this before when I had friends that were very intoxicated and wanted to drive, and I had to threaten to call the police on them to basically change their mind. And if they didn't, I would have done it. Not just because I would worry about my own friend, but it would be other people on the road. I had a good friend of mine 2 years ago. Really good, good friend of mine, good friend of Maggie's, my assistant, my former assistant. And, he hit a tree on the way home and died. And that was tragic, but fortunately he didn't take anyone else out on the way. I know that sounds gross, sick, sad, but it's the truth. Now that's why, ever since then, I don't care if you're hammered and you're trying to get behind the wheel, I'm going to stop you. I had a family member try to get on his motorcycle when he was very clearly drunk. I don't care if he gets mad at me, and I did what I had to do to keep him off that motorcycle that night. Won't go into it, but that's haven't heard from him in a while. Don't really care. He's alive. The argument between them was really intense. A source close to LA Police Department said there were 0 911 calls from O'Brien's house that night. And despite partygoers' concerns, nobody predicted what would happen next, that Rob and Michelle Reiner would be found passed away at their son's hand. Only the murderer is responsible, and I agree with that. But it must be gut-wrenching for Conan to learn how things turned out. I'm sure that night is replaying for him over and over again. It's just so awful and sad. In another haunting revelation, the Daily Mail has also learned that Rob Reiner had confided to friends at that very same party about being scared of his own son. I'm petrified of him. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm afraid of my son. I think my own son can hurt me, Reiner allegedly said immediately after his altercation with Nick. Those comments resurfaced at an impromptu memorial attended by Hollywood A-listers on Monday, where the details of the party were discussed, according to a source. The insider told the Daily Mail that several attendees were left in tears upon hearing what Rob had said. Probably guilt for not calling police, probably guilt for worrying more about their reputations and their Christmas party not being in the headlines. Well, now it's in the headlines. The insider told the Daily Mail that several attendees were left in tears. The Daily Mail contacted representatives for all the stars at the meeting. One spokesman denied that Rob had made those comments about Nick at O'Brien's party. TMZ first reported that Reiner had a very loud argument with his son at the holiday party in which a legendary movie director and wife left. The Reiners have reportedly brought Nick to the star-studded event to, quote, keep an eye on him, putting everyone else at risk, apparently. Nick had been living in the Reiners' guest house at the Brentwood mansion after years of substance abuse and at least 18 stints in rehab and some periods of homelessness. Sources have also confirmed to TMZ that he was suffering with worsening schizophrenia and became erratic and dangerous when doctors changed his medication just weeks before the tragedy. Guests at the A-list party say that Nick displayed antisocial behavior, such as staring at attendees and repeatedly asking people if they were famous, according to reports. I mean, it's clear that that Rob Reiner probably loved his son. There are some rumors that he got passed around in Hollywood and this, that, and the other thing, and that's why he is the way he is. But the reality is, mental health doesn't really care about how much money you have. In fact, it can get much worse. Going to rehab 18 times probably seems like maybe he had an issue that warranted maybe permanent residence at mental health facilities. People with drug abuse problems often use those drugs because they have other underlying issues, in this case, schizophrenia, and many other issues that are untreated. And this is the thing that is really sad. He reminded them all that they're anti-police. A lot of discussion and comments that if the cops were called, the house where the fight was happening, we don't know. If the law had been called, there's a great chance Rob and Michelle would still be alive. I hate that is kind of it's just the truth. If somebody had the courage to call the police that night, Nick Reiner probably would have been held and Rob and his wife would probably still be alive. I don't say that to put any blame on Rob and his wife because they probably were trying to do the best they can. Other people at the party probably didn't want, this to become a thing, but they should have. Now everyone's out there is desperately trying to cover it up. Conan O'Brien's, quote, saw no fight between Rob and his alleged son. Hollywood execs reveal. But then why are so many people that saying that Conan O'Brien refused to call 911 and told others not to call 911? This is BS, the executive said of the reports, going further to explain that the 32-year-old did seem erratic in his conduct, but the fight with his father was pure fiction. I don't believe that. I believe that's a lie. I believe they're trying to cover this up. There are just way too many people who were at the party that said they had a loud fight. This story that Rob Reiner was afraid of his son. I don't think that these people were making that up. I just don't. I think they're trying to cover for Conan O'Brien. Conan O'Brien allegedly talked a friend out of calling the cops. I believe that that's entirely true. I don't think Conan was, I don't think that Conan's the bad guy here. Nick is the bad guy here. But here's the thing. What Reiner's son said to Bill Hader to get him thrown out of the party. Here's what, let's see. Nick allegedly asked Bill Hader and several others at the guest the same code of questions. What is your name? What is your last name? Are you famous? Rob and his son got in a heated argument at the party, with one guest alleging Rob told his son his behavior was inappropriate. Another guest told the New York Times that Nick seemed anxious and uncomfortable throughout the night and in a way that deeply unsettled them. A guest revealed similarly to people that Nick was freaking everyone out, acting crazy, kept asking people if they were famous. Nick was eventually asked to leave, and the bodies of Rob and Michelle were found less than 24 hours later. This is what happens when you are more worried about your reputation than your kids and the safety of others. I don't think that Rob Reiner was a great guy. His son was messed up because, Hollywood, but not a good look for Conan. Absolutely should have called the cops. Just tragic all around. I hope you're informed by this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.